Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning to this new panel. Welcome back for those of you that were listening into session one. Welcome to those that have just joined us at 11 o'clock. Maybe you gave yourself a bit of a lie-in on this Saturday morning, and why not? Why shouldn't you? So we're absolutely delighted. This is the second session of our summer Fete this morning. The PIMS is up on the screen, the frame around the side of the room. You may have yours with you. You may have already started drinking it. Who knows? But a very warm welcome to you all. It's looking like it's slightly sunnier in some people's rooms than it is in the room that I'm in. So hopefully the sun is shining where you are and it's feeling a bit summery. This is our second session. So in our first session, we talked about celebrating headship, perhaps, but celebrating the role that Heads Up for Headteachers is playing for our network in helping them to celebrate that headship and helping them to be positive as leaders in the system that we all operate in. And in this session, we're going to explore a little bit more deeply. One of the things that we do through the Heads Up for Headteachers network is to help leaders to reconnect with their purpose, their core purpose, the reason why they became head teachers in the first place. And that's very much our mission, is recognizing that pre-pandemic, if we go back, if we can remember that far back in time, if we go back to before the pandemic, for some leaders, for some of the time, there was we all apply to become school leaders and head teachers with passion and with determination because we want to make a difference to young people and to our communities. And that's the sort of leader that we set out to be. But the various demands of the education system can sometimes feel as if those two things diverge away from each other. So there's the leader that you set out to be over here, and then there's the leader that the system demands you be over here. And what's really important from a well-being point of view, which is ultimately at the core of what we do at Heads Up, is to help people feel really good about themselves and their job, and to have that sense of positivity in regard to their well-being, is try to close that gap and that divergence and reconnect. What we've seen in the last 18 months is where that happens at a system level. Sometimes because of the demands of the system, we've also then had the additional ingredient of the pandemic. I don't think any head teacher in the land would say that they became a head teacher or a school leader to manage closing bubbles and how we're going to clean our desks and the various sort of health and safety protocols that we've needed to put in place. And of course, that's not why we became school leaders. That's not the purpose of ourselves in the role that we have as head teachers. Our purpose is very much driven around education and young people and communities and creating communities of education and learners. And yet we've had to do all of this other stuff. So when we talk about well-being in our system, we're very good at talking about well-being for young people, and we're very good at talking about well-being for staff and for schools. But often left out of the equation for all sorts of complicated reasons is well-being for the people who lead those communities. Our view at Heads Up for Headteachers, which we've discussed often and regularly with the DFE and with unions, is that we shouldn't be doing that last, we should be doing that first. And one of our slogans is where's your head at? But underneath that sits another slogan is, if we don't get the head's head right, how do we have a chance of getting them well-being support in the rest of the community? At the heart of that is this notion of reconnecting with purpose. What strategies are there that help us to stay connected or to reconnect? And with the key being that when we do reconnect with the purpose of why we do the job that we do, it innately brings us a sense of joy and accomplishment and nourishment, because that's why we do the job. There's nothing better than that moment as a head teacher that you see when you're walking around your school and there's a really fantastic interplay between a group of children in a classroom and they're learning and the culture's right and it feels like a learning culture. It's the biggest buzz in the world. It's one of the things that makes it the best job in the world. That's our purpose. And the reason why it lifts us and it makes us smile and it makes our hearts leap is because that's what we set out to do. It's less often, although I'm sure it is the case for some people, when you're sat in a finance budgetary meeting and you're trying to work out the best way of saving that £100,000 that you haven't got. Okay, that tends to bring us less joy. It's part of the job though. It's part of the matrix of things that we do. But this is very much a session about the wonderful leaders that are joining us on this panel, about how can we make sure we stay connected or reconnect with our purpose? What strategies do they use? How do they do it? And what does it mean for them? So that's what this next sort of 45 minutes is all about. We are joined by another group of brilliant people from within the network and across the network who contribute in all sorts of ways, but also hopefully benefit from being part of the network. They can say that themselves if they don't, but I hope that they do. And we're going to kick off with the wonderful Sharifah. So Sharifah, I'm going to come to you first. And you talk about this sort of reconnection with purpose through the notion of oneness. So I'm going to ask you to explore that a little bit further and share that with the people watching.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. The first thing is I wanted to share something with you because Kate asked me in a back room backstage, am I going on my soapbox? I'm going to do something better than going on my soapbox because Audrey in a previous session said that it's too early in the morning for head teachers to start drinking. Now I'm hoping what I've got here, and I'm going to open it up in public, okay? So if you don't mind, I think I know what it is. Ta-da! And I'm going to do this now because this is what it's all about. This is what this morning is all about. It is a celebration. It must be, it has to be, because after a year of such chaos and such challenges, not only have we survived, we're together now. You know, we've managed this morning, and hopefully some people will be able to connect through the video as well. Cheers, everyone. I don't know about you, but I've earned this, and I'm sure every single one of you have earned it as well. So there you go. Cheers. I don't know what you're on, James and Naomi. You've got to have something on you, surely. That's it. Brilliant. Thank you. Right. So connecting with my purpose. You know, I've been thinking about this and I've been reflecting on this as well. And to me, and it's just a personal point of view, it's quite easy. Pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, post-pandemic, I just serve as me. And you know, when I lead, and I think as leaders, not only as leaders of organizations, we lead in classrooms, we lead our families, we lead our communities. You know, the values that I bring with me are values of compassion. And I'm sure you all know that, and I'm sure you all agree with that. The values of kindness, the values of being determined that this world must be a better place. It has to be a better place. And it's down to every single one of us. It's down to me. And that's my purpose. My purpose is because I know it is down to me as well as everybody else to make it better for the children, my children, your children, the children who are coming after the next generation. And we all each have our role to play in society. And I think with that comes a huge sense of responsibility. Of course it does, because you want to get it right. But you can't get it right every single day. It's about learning from experience, learning from mistakes. And that's what Heads Up is all about, because we learn from other people's experiences as well. You know, I said in the video before, it was the first time I watched a video, actually. It was the first time I saw myself. And I thought, oh my God, I look really serious. I must stop having this sort of knitted brows or whatever it is. But I think there was a truth in all those videos. You know, it's like we all know why we are here. We all know that we have a purpose, a reason, a service, not only to ourselves, but to others. And that's because the world is not just yet. It isn't. And we know that. Every single day we wake up and we hear the news, we read the news, we look out, you know, our window and are thinking, it's not good enough yet. It's not good enough for the children that we serve. It's not good enough for the children that my children are going to have. It's not good enough yet. And I keep on thinking, really, what's driving my values and the sense of purpose? What makes me wake up every single day and get in the car and get to school and do the job I have to do, knowing that today is going to be tough? And the last few weeks I don't know how we are still standing. Honestly, how are we still smiling? How are we still here on a Saturday afternoon connecting with ourselves? Because it's been hard. It's been one of the hardest things, bar having the children I've had on that birthing table. It's been difficult. However, in that difficulty as well, there's been so much joy. There's been joy when exactly what James says. I see the children, you know, feeling happy in themselves. I see them feeling secure. I see them learning. I see them surviving even through the challenges that they have faced. And that's because we're doing something right here. We have to be, because that's the only reason why they come into school and they're still smiling as well. But there's another reason for my purpose. And I have shown this before, and I found another picture. It's these four. They don't look like that. Mark will know them. So Mark, who is on the screen, he's nodding now. He will know at least 3 of them, if not all of them, because he has taught 3 of them. And they are all young adults themselves. The eldest there is now 25, you know. And I keep on thinking, what advice would I give my children if they were here as children today? How would I serve my children? I think I've served them hopefully quite well. Hopefully that they'll come back and say, yes, Mom, you've done a good job. But would I place my own children in the school I lead today? 100% yes. Would I want my children to go through the education system that is here today? I'm not so sure. I must say, personally, I'm not so sure, because there's so many things that we still need to fix. But in terms of my school and the values that I lead them with, I would put my children in that school. So that's my purpose. It's a privilege. You know, I lead hopefully with humility. It might not sound like it, but I do. I think it's an honor to be here, to listen to other people's story, to take them on board, and to serve with, I don't know, with love, really, to serve with love.
Sharifah, brilliant, thank you. If you could just pop yourself back on mute, lovely, that would be great. There'll be a bit of feedback, but yeah, I think as you always do, a sort of really passionate exploration of the role that you do, and the journey that you've been on through the last sort of 18 months, you know, to headship. Is one that again we've sort of celebrated with you in the same way that we have done with Kelly. And I think it's interesting, as we quite often, you know, you can quite often get accused of this. Again, it's a bit positional, and often education is positional. But you know, you can't talk about the things that are challenging because somehow that's being negative about the education system. But it is challenging, and it's okay to accept that. And one of the things that we try to do at Heads Up is say it's okay to say it's challenging. That doesn't mean you're trashing it. What you're doing is outlining the position that we're in, and therefore, you know, giving people that sense of purpose for doing something about it. And I think that's really important, that there is a network, and hopefully Heads Up for Headteachers is it for some people, where we can say, actually, no, this isn't right. This does need to change, and the world does need to change. That doesn't mean we're being negative about the education system that we've got. As we said earlier, we do a great job doing what we do at the moment. But we also need to recognise that it does need to change, and for some people, that future focus is absolutely their sense of purpose. That's what drives them on. You know, mine, you've articulated yours, but mine, whenever I distill it right down, it always comes back to making a difference. If I can make a difference in the roles that I'm doing, then that gives me a sense of purpose, and that gives me a sense of well-being. So thank you for sharing yours, Mark. I'm gonna come to you now to sort of talk about how you bring that to the table in your job, because you know, one of the things that's fascinating about headship, I think, is the fact that we talked about this earlier on, the blend between the personal you and the professional you. It's often blurred. There is not a distinct finishing line between one or the other, and ultimately our schools become a representation of who we are, and that's no bad thing. In fact, that's a great thing. But actually, how do you do that? How do you bring your sense of purpose to your community? So Mark, over to you.
Thank you, James. Morning, everyone. It's lovely to see you all. And Sharifah, I need caffeine at this time in the morning. I can't do the alcohol just yet, but I'll have it chilled for later. And thank you very much. Thanks for having me, everyone. It's a really good question. I was listening earlier as well. And Sharifah, you've inspired me even this morning around purpose. And I think just going back to Heads Up, that's what Heads Up does. Listening to other people, listening to their purpose. You know, on a Saturday morning, for me, it really does just lift you, and it's sometimes what you need. Sometimes what you need is just to process the week. I don't know if James actually remembers, but it was a couple of years ago when we first met, and it was in a random hotel, nothing to do with Heads Up, for a different event, and we ended up chatting. And one of the first things I said to James was, the reason I'm doing this job, the reason I'm a head teacher, is because I want to lead a school that enables staff and students to thrive, but I want to do it in a sustainable way. I want to show other people that it's possible to do it, and, you know, not burn out and not have to leave and all those things. It was about, I was 3 years into my headship. So it was about a year ago. I've been a head for now 4 years. That's when I joined Heads Up, because I was looking for something that would help me in that purpose of trying to sustain not only myself, but also the schools that I lead and the people that I lead. And I've done a load of thinking, and we all will have done, everybody who's watching this, I'm sure, have done a lot of thinking about what it means to thrive for schools. And in particular, our focus will have probably been on the kids. You know, they'll have been on the students, on the pupils. How do we make sure that they thrive in their learning, in their, you know, in their aspirations, in their day-to-day activities and all those things? But have we given enough thought to what it means to thrive for us, first of all, as we've said, and the people that, you know, the teachers, the leaders that also support the school, and then everybody. So almost my conception of school leadership now is not just about focusing entirely on the kids, it's on the whole organization. How do we make sure that the entire organization, me included, thrive and do it in a sustainable way? So I've done a lot of thinking about it. I've done a lot of reading about it. I've tried to find out what what research says about it. And it comes down to some really simple things that everybody already knows. There's not rocket science, but it is about just making it happen. So I made, just before now, I made a list of 5 like big words, and they are move. So you have to physically move in order to thrive and be sustained. You have to laugh. You have to express yourself. You have to learn and create, and you have to connect. Those are the things. That's what all the research says. That's what, there's nothing else beyond that. And so I've tried to, and I'm still learning and I'm still doing it, trying to make my school a place where those things happen. And I try to do those myself as well, and, try to do them every day. The other thing that makes things happen, the sustainability part, is to make it into a habit. So the thing that, we all know that, we are what we habitually do. I think that was Aristotle, but I'm not quite sure. We do need to make sure that we put things into our calendars. We need to make sure that we do the things. Otherwise, we know that what's important gets replaced by what's urgent and what's now. So how do you do it? So, I mean, personally, I've done it in loads of different ways. So I really like to move. I like to exercise, but I have a massive commute and I have a long job and I have 2 schools to currently lead. So how do I do it? So I deliberately cycle to work. It's just one of the quick things that I do. It means that I'm exercising on the way there and on the way back. But then I also thought that we needed to think about, how do we make our kids move and also connect them to a bigger purpose? So right now, and I'm feeling terribly guilty, but right now, we've got staff from our trust who are doing a really big walk. We've got a charity challenge where everybody is, we're trying to knock up the, I think, 5,960 something miles that it would take to walk to Tokyo for the Olympics. So we came up with that destination, and our kids and our staff are jogging, walking, cycling, running to be able to contribute to those miles as an organization. And some of them are doing it right now as we speak. So I'm really excited, and a big shout out to them. But this week in my school and across the 3 schools in our trust, it just, students in every day have been walking, and we clocked up in one of the schools 500 miles on average a day across the organization. So I'm really pleased about that. So thinking about ways in which we can just those sustainability things, those ways of thriving, trying to add them to what we habitually do. The other thing that I would say is about connection, is I think that's why Heads Up is really important to me, because you live so many things in a week, and Chris's list from before was very revelatory in terms of all of those things that we do, from finance to premises to curriculum to teaching and learning to staffing to recruitment, all those things. And how do we make sure that we're still doing all the things that are important? And so I think Heads Up as a routine, as a Saturday morning, or if you go on a Wednesday night, it just becomes a routine. I call my mum on a Sunday night, and I go to Heads Up on a Saturday morning. And in that time, you make sense of the things that you've experienced, you laugh, you share, you connect with others, and you realize that actually you're not alone, that other people are going through similar things, and also you can then connect beyond it. One of the joys of Heads Up that I didn't know that was going to happen was that I would see loads of friendly and familiar faces. So as Sharifah said, she's there. I've taught, I think, 3 of her 4 kids. One of them currently works in my school, and I also connected with other local head teachers that I knew, and I've developed projects with them as a result of Heads Up. We've reconnected, and so then done things outside of the Heads Up network, which has been fantastic. And so you know, there's so many ways in which I think Heads Up not only helps you to reconnect to your purpose habitually every week, but also helps you to be sustained as a head teacher, and to make sure that it's done in a way that isn't going to lead to, you know, short-term burnout and exhaustion, etc. So I'm really proud to be part of the network, and I'm always, you know, shouting its benefits from the hilltops, and I'll continue to do so.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark. And I think I lost count of the number of times that you used the word joy, but I'm really pleased that you did, because I think there is something in all of this, that our work should be joyful. Okay, I can't, you know, it's like when people talk about being happy, you can't be happy all of the time, you know, and you can't be joyful all the time. But we should be able to clearly identify where we're getting our joy from. And I think, you know, what you've talked about in terms of how you're doing that in your school, the 5 things you've identified, and then how you're making those happen for that sense of well-being and purpose in your school, I think is a good reminder. I think that there are schools up and down the country where that happens every single day, but as a system, it sometimes feels as if that's missing. And, you know, I'm often bothered by this notion that, you know, we talk about school as something which prepares children for the future. And of course it does, but it's become sort of isolated in that activity. And what you've just talked about is, okay, what about the now? Where's the joy for our young people in the now? Where's the living that they're doing right now? They don't become alive at the age of 18 when they go off to university. They are living individuals right now. And I think, you know, if we, and again, it's massive generalization, but if we can hold on to that sense of fun and joy in learning and education and in our communities for our young people, and it does just worry me that perhaps we are losing sight of that a little bit. But actually, if the pandemic's been a reminder of anything, it's been a reminder of the need to pull that back. I also love the way that you talk about it holistically. So it's not about children before staff or staff before children. You often hear that positional, well, always put the children first. Actually, surely it's about always putting everybody first, including, as you say yourself, it shouldn't be about one over the other. And what we've seen during the pandemic, what has, I think for some an eye-opener, although for many head teachers I don't think it is at all, because it's just the reality, is that we lead communities, and those communities include parents and families. And certainly at the very beginning of the pandemic, it was a reminder that schools are about so much more than SATs results and phonics results and GCSE results and A-level results. Those things are important, but they're a tiny slice of what we do. What we do is so much more than that. And, you know, one of my hopes for the sort of post-pandemic recovery period is we don't lose sight of that. And in the way that you're describing, I think, you know, when we do those things as leaders, because ultimately, I think the thing that connects most head teachers together is a value set and a purpose, which is around the things that you've talked about and Sharifah has talked about making a difference for young people and their families and the community. That's not just about, we're going to get you a grade 8 in English GCSE. That's a tiny bit of making a difference for young people. So let's hope that we can hold on to it in its entirety, because ultimately those are the things that give us our joy. I'm gonna move over now to Naomi, and I have to say I discovered this completely by accident, but one of the things that we now use a lot as part of the work that we do at Heads Up is the Ikigai framework, and this sense of sort of Japanese philosophy of the sense of finding your reason for being, which I know, Naomi, is something that you put an awful lot of work into, an awful lot of store by. So I'm going to hand over to you to talk a little bit about Ikigai and connection and what it means to have sort of purposeful education.
Thank you. And yeah, I just want to kind of acknowledge, you know, Mark and Sharifah, because when you're in that energy, and we can all feel the energy that you're putting into the space, that's purpose. You know, it's a felt sense, it's embodied. And you used a phrase, James, you know, when your heart leaps. And that's when we know that we're really on purpose. So our body knows, you know, we know at a soul level when we're in it. And so I'll come to Ikigai, but I think one of the ways that we can remember our purpose and stay connected to it is really be that detective around, what am I feeling? What am I sensing? What's alive in me right now? and then be curious about what's going on here, because I'm clearly in my purpose in this moment. And I completely agree with you, James. You know, purpose doesn't have to be a grandiose kind of world shifting statement. You know, it's here now. It's here in us now, doing what we're doing in this moment. And I think what's interesting is that purpose, there was some research done which said that fewer than 20% of leaders know their purpose, and even fewer than that can truly articulate it. So I think, yes, we need to feel it, and that's one way of knowing, but another way of knowing is to articulate it as a statement, as your Ikigai, because then it becomes this anchor that we can keep coming back to. So I'm borderline obsessed with purpose, because when I'm a coach and I have a community called Purposeful Educators, and I'm just very connected through what you do as well. I believe in the power of groups, and what I kept noticing was this loss of self. You know, teachers and head teachers arriving, and there was just a loss of connection to self, to purpose, to soul. And it takes time to restore that, and there's a healing process there as well. So we do all kinds of things to connect back to purpose. And so Ikigai, yeah, it comes from this Japanese word, which means a reason for being, or a reason to wake up in the morning. And there are 4 areas of it. So what you love, what brings you joy, to come back to Mark's word, what brings you joy, what you're great at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And so we get really clear on each of those areas, and then it becomes a practice, like Mark's saying, you know, it's a habit. How can I bring those things into my daily life? And the thing that matters a lot in our work that I've noticed is the joy. Joy is a revolutionary emotion. If you think about when you're in fear, when you're in imposter syndrome, when you're in retreat, there is a lack of creativity there. But if you're in joy, if you're alive, anything is possible. Hence this sense of revolution. And so we need to bring more joy into our days. And so as a group, we really get clear on what does bring you joy. Oh, it's swimming in the sea. It's playing music. It's writing poetry. I haven't written in a while. And we hold each other really accountable. How are you going to bring that into your life? Because there's that wonderful Howard Thurman quote, isn't there, of don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And so I think that Ikigai is really about connecting back to your passions, to your joy, and it's about boundaries. It's then about what can I put in place to really honor myself and what brings me joy, so that I can come alive and serve in the way that I want to serve. And if I've got time, there are a couple of other ways that you can connect to purpose. So Ikigai is powerful. I've mentioned this kind of being a purpose detective, like in your body and your sensations. I think, you know, you've alluded to it as well, James. Storytelling. Tell me about a moment when you truly felt you were in your power and you were having an impact. And it can be a very small moment. You know, it might just be something that happened in your classroom. But create the space, which is what Heads Up does so expertly, for someone to tell their story, have an expert listener who is able to reflect back, and it's all there. This never ceases to astonish me. You ask an educator to tell a story about something where they felt true connection, their values are there, their purpose is there, everything. So telling stories is a great way to connect back to purpose. Being in groups, which is what you do as well, and having this acknowledgement. We did this amazing activity called possiping. And so let's say we were all wanted to talk about Sharifah. So she might she might turn slightly away, and we would all say, okay, so what do we see in Sharifah? And what is our longing for her? And what is our vision for what she's going to create? And it's incredible because you have all these people telling you the truth about you because they've witnessed you. And we're not great at seeing that for ourselves. So when you hear that from a bunch of people, it's very difficult to ignore. You have to accept it. And then you've got this accountability. So those are a few ways. And then questions, what are you longing for? What brings you alive? What is the magic that only you create? And my dream certainly is to ask all teachers, coming back to Mark's point about everyone in a school, ask all teachers and all children those questions in performance management, line management, and get really clear on what their purpose is. And then what's getting in the way of you doing that here? How can we remove those barriers? What is it that you want to create? And it might be a crazy project like running to Tokyo, but it's like, go do that. And then you've got this aliveness and people working at 90, 100% of their capacity, their soul's capacity, rather than 20 or 30. Because we can all work 80 hours a week, but we might only be operating at 20% of our capacity. So yeah, a few things there. And just finally, I will say, what is purpose actually? And for me, it's two things. It's who you are at your core. Okay. And I do, okay, so firstly, it's who you are at your core. And we're longing to just be seen for that, aren't we? We're longing to belong for who we are. That's just a truth about humanity. So who we are at our core. And secondly, the impact that we're longing to have and that we are uniquely placed to have. We are all here for a reason. And actually getting words around that in a statement is really empowering. So when you ask an educator, what's your purpose? They will say to make a difference. But what we say is, what is the difference you are uniquely placed to have? Let's get really, really clear on that. And then the second part is, who are you being to have that impact? And that's the part that a lot of educators are not connected with. And so we really surface that truth about who you are to have that impact. And then what I witness over and over again is like the heavens open, the heavens are unfastened when somebody absolutely connects with those two truths. And so that's why I do this work, because when you see people arrive and they've had that loss of self, and then you go on this journey and there's this kind of opening, there's the revolution, there's the energy that we really need for our schools and for our planet. So I'll stop there.
Brilliant, thank you, Naomi. And yeah, it's everything you say resonates. And you do such great work in our system. And if people are watching and they don't know Purposeful Educators, then please do go and look it up, because it's there are many networks that contribute really positively to well-being in a very deep way. But I would say that Purposeful Educators is definitely up there at the top of that list. And Naomi, thank you for all of the work that you do to support leaders in education. I think one of the things that I find interesting in the work that I do with Heads Up, but also in other work, is when you look at the Ikigai framework, is where sometimes you get a bit of a sort of paradox is in the what the world needs section. And there's the version of what the world needs that as a leader of a community, because you know your community and you know your community's context. And then there's the version of what the world needs that you're told. And I think that's sometimes where the conflict and the divergence happens, because the bit that you're told is coming externally, and often it's Ofsted, or it's the DFE, or it's what you hear in the media, or it's just the diversity of what your parents want from your school. And that makes the what the world needs bit really fuzzy and grey sometimes. Whereas actually, I think for most leaders, it's really clear. You know what your school needs, and you know what needs to be done. And I think that's when we talk about this sort of idea of values, that this divergence, but the leader you want to be and the leader that you end up being. I think that's often where that happens through that Ikigai framework, is actually what does your community? Nobody knows that better than you. Literally nobody. I do some work as a school improvement advisor, which is a title I hate, and I keep telling the people I do the work for, please can we call it something else? Because actually, nobody knows their school like the head, and therefore nobody knows what needs to be developed rather than improved like the head does. But often there is so much of our system which is set up to tell head teachers what needs to be done. And it's that, I think, where we sometimes get that divergence. But I also want to pick up, Naomi, on the point that you make about the small moments. It is the small moments, and go and look for them. Spend time. One of the things that we tell our sort of head teachers, one thing you can go and do, make it, Mark, your point about diary management, make 10 minutes in your day every single day to walk around your school for no other purpose than to look for the impact of the things that you've done as a leader. And I'm not talking about a self-evaluation form, and I'm talking about something you're going to stick in your own personal journal. And it might be the way that one child talks really kindly to another. It might be a brilliant question that a young person has asked. It may be the way that a member of staff is looking after somebody who's in pain or hurts. It can be any of those things, but those things. And one of the head teachers in one of our local authority pieces of work that we did, she really took that on board. She called them her pause, her positive affirmation walks, and she did them every day. And the lift that gives you as a validation of what you do as a leader, not in some sort of theoretical, educational philosophy sense, but in reality on the ground in your school, is so powerful. And it really does lift you and reconnect you with your purpose. So those are two things, Naomi, really, really resonated with me from what you said. Kate, I'm going to come to you, because you've had, as many people in the HeadsUp network have had, you've had shifting purpose, because that's the other thing, is your purpose doesn't necessarily remain the same. And so what's your view on purpose, Lovely, in terms of, the purpose that you had as a leader of a school, and your purpose now as the sort of the brilliant leader of the sort of HeadsUp network? What does purpose mean for you?
I think this is so tricky, because I honestly believe that purpose sometimes shifts, and it's really, you've got to move with that shift, haven't you? And sometimes that's really difficult to accept. Your purpose changes, and you have to follow that and keep following that and keep changing your behaviors in order to sort of pursue that new purpose. So as somebody that's come out of headship and is now leading, an incredible network or community for head teachers, I feel like my own purpose has shifted. But, what HeadsUp does is it intentionally, we haven't even mentioned this word, James, because we talk about this all the time. HeadsUp intentionally provides this space, and that's what makes it unique, because there is no other space that specifically and intentionally focus on head teacher well-being and gives them this really, really safe space to talk about their core purpose. We focus very specifically on, we've mentioned before, how are you? We don't just accept, yeah, I'm fine, because that's what everyone's response is. Chair of Governors asks you, and how are you? Yeah, I'm fine, and we move on. And the HeadsUp, it digs deeper. You talked about noticing as well, Naomi. You talked about noticing. Head teachers, because I take crisis calls and coaching calls and I facilitate the meetings, head teachers are always saying how it feels isolating, how it feels relentless. The workload is relentless. It feels, you're firefighting all the time. And being able to have conversations where you encourage people to notice what's happening in their week really helps them draw back to their core purpose, because otherwise those moments disappear. You can see them. You pop down to early years at break time and you see these really joyful moments, and then they're gone because you walk back to your office and you've got your SEF to do, or, Ofsted have called, or you've got a staff meeting to plan for, and that moment is lost. So the intentional space that HeadsUp provides gives people an opportunity to firstly acknowledge that those moments are happening, and secondly, share them with other people. And in sharing those moments that bring you back to your purpose with other people, it helps other people to recognize their joyful moments as well. So it's just a really powerful way to connect, like not only with other people in the network, but to connect with yourself as well and remember those things. And I think the head teachers in the network are really good at doing this now. We talked in Ikigai about what are you good at? And I asked this question recently in a local authority session, And I said, I think you're going to find this really uncomfortable, because generally humans find it really difficult to talk about the things that they are good at. And maybe it's a British thing, I don't know, but maybe we feel like we're blowing our own trumpet, or we're boasting, or we don't have very much practice about talking about what we're good at. So we drop this into heads up sessions like fairly often now, because it pushes people outside of their comfort zone, so they start to grow, and it's good for them to really dig deep and think, no, I'm actually really good at leading those staff meetings. I'm really good at developing staff. I'm really good at these things that I'm not acknowledging myself, and I'm not championing, and I'm not celebrating with other people. So it gives them those opportunities. And that the network just lifts each other up. So they say, yeah, you are good at that, that's fantastic. And I've seen that in you, and you've shared that, and you go away feeling amazing. And you're like, yes, I am good at that. I knew I was good at that, but now I've said it out loud, I'm affirming it. I'm good at that. And head teachers just need that positivity, because it is a relentless job. You've got to slow down and be mindful. And that's so hard when the job is 100 miles an hour. But what Heads Up does on a Saturday morning, on a Wednesday evening, on a phone call, on a DM to your buddy, that's what it does. It gives that intentional space to be positive and focus on all the good stuff that is going on.
Brilliant, thank you, Kate. And yeah, so much truth in what you say. I sort of actually, what the bit I'm going to pull out of that is the bit about moments, and actually it's a nice lead into our next session, which is about hopes for Ed, which is a sort of visionary, transformational view of what education could be, rather than this sort of reformative, fixing what's broken view. But the thing about moments, I think, is really important. One of the things I think has happened, I think has happened, but I think it's been validated by lots of voices in the Heads Up network, is over the last sort of decade, 15 years, we've started to define education by its output, and we've defined it by its output. And the simplest way of doing that is to look at the assessment output. So whether it's phonics or SATs or Progress 8 scores or GCSE scores. And in doing that, that's almost become the purpose of education, which is when you step away from it and you think about it, it's just the most ridiculous scenario that we define something which is so huge and complex by its sort of simplest assessment, which in itself doesn't even capture the entirety of learning that's happened. But that's what we've done. And that, in many respects, that's almost become, it's defined education in England. It's defined by, what was your Progress 8 score? That defines your school. What was your SAT score? That defines your school. What was your phonics score? That defines Key Stage early years in Key Stage 1. And yet we know at heart, in our heart and in the fire in our belly where our purpose sits, we know that's not true. We know that's not the case. And I would, when we talk about redefining education, you can get really grandiose about that stuff, but I think it's about the moments, Kate. I think it's exactly what you've said. It's about those little moments in your school. And education is complex. But what it is the complexity of those millions of little moments and interactions that happen in complex communities every single day. Now, you try and write that into a SEF and you're going to struggle. You try and look for it to judge it. How do you even go about doing that? But the one person in a school who knows it in its overview, supported by all of the people who work in that school, is then the head teacher. You know what those moments are. And as Kate says, I think one of the things I would just encourage everybody to do is to don't let them slip you by. In trying to define your education by your exam outcomes or your SATs outcomes or where you are with writing or reading or how your history results have been, don't let all of the other stuff slip by you, accidentally or otherwise, because I think that's what happens often, and that's when we get disconnected, because it becomes about the chase for results rather than being about, actually, let's just capture all of these complex, brilliant moments that are going on. So, but that leads us really nicely into the session that we've got next, which is one of the other things that we do at Hopes for Ed. Is we realized really early on that we had hundreds of values aligned, purpose aligned leaders in the same space, and actually, yeah, they want to talk about themselves and how they're looking after themselves, and that's really, really important, and reconnecting with a purpose. But then they also want to talk about how that plays out as a system, actually. And as a lead into the next session, one of the things that we talk about all of the time is we have to stop looking up to other people to change our education system to be the one that we want it to be. And we have to connect with each other and look across to do that with each other. And that's why we set up the Hopes for Ed sessions, which we've run over the course of the last 10 months. So they're passionate, caring, purposeful conversations about how we think education can shift and change to meet the changing demands and challenges of our world. So that is our next session. It starts at 12 o'clock. We've got a 15-minute break. I want to extend a huge thanks to Sharifah, to Mark, to Naomi, and to Kate for joining us on this panel. All brilliant people, all brilliantly contributing to our Heads Up for Headteachers network. And thank you very much for spending the time with us this morning. And I hope you will stay with us for the remaining 2 sessions as well. Have a lovely break, everybody. Stretch your legs, get away from the screen, go and cuddle your children, the dog, the cats, go and stand in the garden, take some rays of sunshine. And we look forward to seeing you back here at 12 o'clock